gives his blessings to everyone that's joined here today, both the Thai laity and also the people joining in from different countries. And he gives his anumodana, he rejoices and feels pleased in all of your goodness, that you've come to train your minds in order to attain real, true happiness, not just the happiness of the world. And so we need to understand that happiness has two different varieties. There is both the happiness of the world and the happiness of the Dhamma, and both of these things are very different. And so we ask, how are these two types of happiness different? Well, in the way of the world, having lots of fun and enjoyment is happiness. And so the more fun and enjoyment that we have, the more happiness we have. But this type of happiness is temporary. If the condition for that happiness end, then suffering arises in its place once again. But the happiness in the way of the Dhamma is peace. And so the more peace we have, then the more happiness we have. And for this type of happiness, we don't need to depend on material or external things. If we practice, then we can make it arise in our own mind. And so in order to have this type of happiness of the Dhamma, then we need to change our views and our attitude and make it in line with the Noble Eightfold Path. And this is the way of the Buddha. It's Sammaditthi, which is right view. And this is one of the factors of the Eightfold Path. And so we need this along with the other 7 in order for it to work. So he, speaking in relation to this, I once spoke with a woman who was 60 years old, and she had all of the success in the way of the world. She had a family, she had status, and she said that she'd just found out, like, after having all that for so long, at the age of 60, that she realized that she really didn't need to have a family and these types of things. And so this about having a family, so most people in society aim to have a family. And this is something which is due to our natural instincts, being a human being, or it comes from the tradition which we were brought up around. But the Lord Buddha said that to have a family, more people that we love, is to be more tied up with them, and this causes us to have more suffering and more problems. And so if we study the biography of the Lord Buddha, then we see that he didn't tie himself up with anything. He ordained young, aged, even though he could have had all of the pleasures which come with the life of a prince or a king. He was rich, had this responsibility, and then he had his son was born, Rahula, and then after realizing this was a bond, then he left the home life. And so is this what we think is this type of worldly happiness? Is this what we think is real happiness? And so have you ever considered that in the previous generation, like the generation of our mother and father, they didn't have much development in the world in their days like we have in the modern day. But they still had more happiness than the people of today's world. And why is this? And so in the present we have all of these conveniences and comforts and happiness of the body. But the mind of people in the modern day has more attachments and is also lacking in metta, kindness, and compassion. And most people in the world these days have this problem. And so we don't have to go looking far in order to understand this point. If we just look at the time when we was a youngster, a child, and then we compare it to right now, so which did we feel we had more happiness? The time where we was a kid or the time of the modern day? And so the foundation of the Buddha or the Buddhist religion is that this suffering we have because of attachment. And so if we compare people who have little or nothing and then compare them to people who have a lot, then which one of these types of people would have the most suffering and sadness? And so if we make a quick, easy conclusion, then it would be the present-day people who have the defilements in regards to this 5G technology. And so, to be honest, technology, it does have benefit. But I'm talking about people who are using this technology in a very worldly way, not in a way which perhaps helps in religious affairs. But those of us, like us here, who have come to practice, then it's an incredibly small amount of people who would come to do such a thing like this. As for technology, it's like the more that there is, the more defilement that's produced in the world. So the people who are the older age generation, like our mothers, fathers, grandparents, did they also have kilesa? It's like they also did, but they didn't have these sort of apparatus or accessories which increase the amount of defilement in the mind and make it come out into the surface, and which makes suffering increase ever further, like is the case in the present day world. And the situation in the present day world is something which is very deplorable. And so when we talk about technology then, for instance, using a mobile phone, then if we do have these types of things, then we need to use it in a way which is in line with the Dhamma in order to help us to practice or to develop our minds. And so in the modern day, we can listen to all types of Kruba Ajahns, of great teachers, meditation masters. And we have a lot of convenience around this these days. We can listen to whoever is pleasing to us, whoever matches our character. So when we use the device in this way, then we can actually use it to help us to develop in Dhamma, develop in the way of the mind. And so what we need to do is to change or adjust ourselves in order to go against the flow of the world, because in the way of the world, it's full of attachments, and the way that it's viewed in the way of the world is that the more of these attachments we have, then the more happiness we have. And these attachments are something which are really hard to let go of. But in the way of the Dhamma, the more that we give up and abandon, the more happiness we have increasing. And so the Buddha taught that the foundation to the practice is dana, giving or charity. But most people, they misunderstand this. But really what the Buddha truly taught was to have us let go of our greed, hatred, and delusion, and our selfish ways, and to lift up our minds. And so the Lord Buddha had us uphold and keep sila, moral conduct or precepts. And this is what we call normalcy or normality of body, speech and mind. And so anyone who upholds sila will have regular happiness. And so the important point of the practice is to practice cultivation, bhavana, cultivation of the mind, to make the mind have intelligence and to be aware of the defilements in the mind, the kilesa, as they arise in time. And this is the happiness which we have in the way of the Buddhist dispensation. And so if we talk here about bhavana, cultivation, then the great meditation teachers, the enlightened masters, they taught us to have mindfulness at first. And this is an important factor. And then through mindfulness, this will lead us to samadhi, concentration, and that will give rise to wisdom. And there are many people who have wisdom in the way of the world, but we need both wisdom and mindfulness working together in order for us to be successful in our activities and work. And so I see people these days, they're sometimes using their phone, and to the extent where they're not paying attention to their surrounding environment. And so they drive in a car or a bike and they can fall off or crash, have an accident. Or some people, they're looking at their phone while they're in their car and they're reversing the car and they don't look at their surroundings. And so this leads to possible injury or even possibly death. And so when we think about this topic, then we realize that mindfulness is not a little thing. It helps us to live our lives. And so it's very important for us to practice mindfulness, just like we're doing in this Dhamma practice retreat. So therefore, we need to train ourselves to have mindfulness as our foundation point in our minds and make this develop and bring it to maturity. If we don't train ourselves to have mindfulness, then whenever a emotion comes up of greed, hatred, or delusion, and we don't have mindfulness to protect ourselves from these emotions, then we will have difficulties arising for ourselves. And so the Kruba Ajahns, the great teachers, they compared the mind to a monkey. And so whichever country monkeys live in, they're the same. They can't stay still, moving about all the time. And so in order to control the monkey, the owner of the monkey needs to tie it up to a pole in order to make the monkey stop running all over the place. And so our minds, we have to use the same technique, but we use the Kruba Ajahns tell us that the mind is actually worse than 100 monkeys. And so mindfulness, Sati, is the rope which is used to tie the mind down. And so we use the recitation, for instance, of Buddha, and we make the mind one, mindfulness one, and Buddha one. And we make all of these things come together, gather into this one thing by using Buddha as our rope to tie our mindfulness to it. And so this is having the mantra Buddha as our meditation word to tie the mind down, but we could also use the breath, for example, anapanasati, or else we can just have awareness over the body all day, all throughout our day, watching the movements of the body. And we can use whatever method we want that helps us to tie the mind to the body. So there's a simile which was given from Venerable Ajahn Chah, and he said it's like mindfulness is like pouring water into a cup. So little drops of water is like our mindfulness, and the more that the mindfulness increases, then the more of a longer stream of water comes from the tap, and then this is clear water, and we can compare this longer stream of clear water to sampajanya, or clear awareness, clear knowing. And so we often hear the terms sati and sampajanya, and this is mindful awareness, sati, and sampajanya, clear awareness, and these two things go together. And so if we train to have mindfulness and we make our mindfulness very quick, being aware of things quickly, and then we have this continuity of mindfulness, then we can perhaps make piti arise, or rapture, and then we get a sense of great happiness from this. And so the Buddha was quoted saying that he who has this rapture, he who has rapture in the Dhamma, is bound to be one who has great joy. And so when we have wisdom in the way of the type of happiness which we gain from worldly things, well, in the Buddhist religion, what we need to do is to go against the ways of the world. So, for instance, if we're using technology these days, we have all of this artificial intelligence, and we can use this to search many different Dhamma topics instead, and use the technology in a good way so that it helps us to develop in our practice. And so one of the teachings which comes from one of the chants which we chant about the highest blessings, so asevana cha balanang panditanang cha sevana, this is about not meeting with fools, because fools lead us in the wrong direction, down the wrong path, and we should instead associate with the wise, because the wise lead us down the way which is good and correct. And so with this AI technology, which is mainstream these days, we need to think in the same way, and we need to use it in order to be beneficial towards our mind. And so what's important is that we go down the correct path. And so we need samadhi, which is right view, as the initial point. And so therefore here, right here now, let us practice mindfulness in order to have sampajanya, clear awareness, and samadhi arise. And then if we have this, then this will give rise to rapture within our minds. And then from this our minds will have more energy, a lot of energy. And through this energy, we direct that to contemplate into the Dhamma in order to abandon the defilements out from the mind. And this is walking the path of sila, samadhi, panya, morality, concentration, and wisdom. And so the key point of the practice, or the goal of the practice, is to, which in the way of the Buddhist sasana, the Buddhist religion, we ask what is that? And it's for the abandonment of suffering, the liberation from suffering, to escape out of samsara, the cycle of birth and death. And so there was a great teacher that once gave the comparison that samsara is like having a circular container where ants have climbed up to the top, but they can't go into the container at the bottom, so they just keep on walking around and around the rim of the circular container. And it's something which has no end to it. They just keep going around and around. And so if we don't go against the kilesa, then we just have more and more suffering in samsara. So therefore, in this present existence, this present life which we live, let us progress in the way of the Buddhist teaching and have these qualities of mindfulness, sila, samadhi, and panya, and look at the drawbacks of the fault, the danger in samsara, and not indulging in this sense of fun or enjoyment in the way of the world, which is just a temporary type of enjoyment. And so Ajahn, a great teacher, once gave the comparison of the fun, or the pleasure in the way of the world, saying that it was like sucking a sweet or a candy covered in sugar, but in the center is poison. So in the beginning, the taste is good, but afterwards it leaves the bitter taste of the poison. And so Luang Pu Cha, Venerable Ajahn Chah, he said to some practitioners back in the day, some lay practitioners, he asked them, "Do you know your real home yet?" And they were confused about this. When Luang Pu Cha asked them, "Do you know your real home?" And what this is referring to is like the feeling, the peace that one has within one's own heart and mind. This is what's called the real home, one's real home. And so the external home, our house, it's something which is comfortable and we can rest there, but it can just be a place where our suffering increases. But when we have peace in our minds, then this is a real form of happiness and therefore a true home. And so this home, the external home, can actually be a place of suffering. We may view it as a form of happiness in the way of the world, but we just have very little happiness in that setting. Lumpur Cha at Wat Nong Papong, his monastery in northeast Thailand, he had some lay people once come and ask for a blessing. They were having the younger sister of this lay person was getting married, and then so Lumpur Cha gave a Dhamma talk to them, and he spoke about having a family. He said the word in Thai for family is krop krua. So he was talking about the household life, saying that krop is a word meaning to contain or to kind of box something in, compact it in tightly, maybe. And krua is the word for the kitchen, which he said was, which is a place where people cut things up and it's hot and full of fire. And so being sort of boxed in with a bunch of other family members is what the comparison was to the living at home with the family. And in terms of the kitchen, people would, like there are a lot of sharp instruments in the kitchen, such as knives and forks. It was like people would speak to each other, like they're stabbing each other with their words, like one would stab things with knives and forks, for example. And so we can see that from this previous example, how this is the sort of way of samsara. Then another example, there was a foreigner who came to ordain as a monk. He had seen the fault in samsara, and he was one who liked an adventure, liked to go out adventuring. And so he'd gone off and done all of his education and whatnot. And then after he decided to come and ordain, primarily as a white-robed Anagarika, then as a Samanera, novice monk, and then fully afterwards ordaining as a fully ordained bhikkhu, monk. And he ordained Awat Mapjan, and he has been ordained now for a long time. And this is something which I really rejoice with. So Ajahn Gong was talking about myself, and he was just saying that I've been ordained now for 6 rains now, and he said if I'd not come out to ordain, then surely I'd be with a family and partner or anything by now. And so the Buddha said, for men to have a wife is the highest suffering. And then on the other hand, he also said that for women to have a husband is the highest suffering also. And so therefore, if we're thinking of having a family, then let us increase our efforts in the practice first, and then think about it afterwards. Think why do we want this? And then reflect on those men and women that have ordained as monks and nuns in order to practice the Dhamma. Why is it exactly that they have done this. It must be for a suitable reason. And so in the present day, people still want a family, for example, and if they don't have a family, then they have dogs and cats instead, and they just get really attached to these instead. So if they don't suffer over their children, they just suffer over their dogs and cats. And so people, when they suffer over their dogs and cats, and they're displeased with the way that they're acting, for example, then they just abandon their dogs and cats or give them away, and then this creates bad karma for them. They just generate this karma of like abandoning their baby. And so when we're living together with family members, then we need to have this unity or samaki, togetherness, get along well together. And so, in the household life, then we'll say things to one another that sort of stab at each other a little bit and sort of maybe hurt each other's feelings a little bit. And so we need to have mindfulness in these types of occasions. And so one thing that we can do, for example, is we can have with us a bottle of water, and whenever someone says something to us which makes a sort of negative emotion arise within us, then we can put some water in our mouth and not swallow it. And then by doing this, we can't sort of say something unpleasant back to the person what's caused us to have this negative emotion. We can bless the water beforehand with the blessing of ask the Buddha to bless the water. And then while we've got the holding water in our mouths, it may make us feel quite amused and even make us smile instead. And so having a family, we need to look after each other very well and not get into arguments. We need to do dana, sila together. We need to practice giving and charity together, uphold our precepts together, and practice metta towards one another, have kindness for one another. In the beginning, when we perhaps first start with our partner, everything's all well, we're both young, both sides are young and still attractive, but then as they get older, then start to get sort of less infatuated with one another, and then start to have arguments, and then start bringing up all kinds of old events just to argue with, and this is not good. And so what we need to do instead is we need to look after each other in our families, not get into arguments, but instead aim to practice together. And so to conclude, then this practice of the Dhamma might not be something what's particularly fun, but the happiness which arises from peace, as the Buddha said, there is no higher happiness than that peace. When we have rapture arise in regards to the Dhamma, so we have to come to like the Dhamma, and we have to enjoy the practice of Dhamma, practicing the Dhamma continuously. And so this Dhamma, what we're able to listen to, we can help Dhamma to arise within our minds. And so an example is that, for instance, at our homes, or maybe even in a coffee shop, there is this peaceful atmosphere. We have a sort of peace from these environments, and we have like perhaps a shrine room, meditation room at home. And this is a type of thing which we have in our lives. But I invite you all to instead build peace within your own minds, because our minds have already been attacked or harmed by the mental defilements for a long time already. And so I encourage you to practice the Dhamma in order to transcend suffering. And so there was a great teacher who said that the Buddha Dhamma, the truth of the Lord Buddha that he realized is a Nama Dhamma, which is a phenomena of a mental phenomena. It's not something that you can display physically or show the value of it like you can with material phenomena. Like with material phenomena, Rupa Dhamma, you can show it. It has a form. You can attach a value to it. But the Dharma is not like that. And so to finish this Dharma talk today, I would like to encourage you all to find a method, a way to have mindfulness arise within the mind, and have it arise a lot, have it be very quick with your mindfulness, build it to this degree in accordance with the conditions would arise. And so in our everyday lives. And so the great teachers, one great teacher said that if we are able to practice Sati, mindfulness and Samadhi every day in our everyday life, in the present day, then this is something which is quite amazing and something which is very good. And so whatever we do in life, we need a goal. And so when we're practicing the Dhamma, let us make our goal to abandon suffering, to transcend it. And at the very least, let us have the goal to at least make our time that we spend in samsara shorter. So once again, to conclude in the practice, whatever methods we use, whatever way we do the practice, we need to do it for the reason, for the aim of letting go, and this is the foundation. And so whatever we're attached to, we need to let it go. It's like we need to let go of all of the emotions and sense impressions. And this is the correct way of practice that Luang Pu Cha himself taught. And so as Luang Por Anan often says, quoting Luang Por Cha, he said that whatever it is, whatever it may be, it has its importance. But what's more important is letting go. That's the most important thing. Or maybe what's more important is if when you let go, then by letting go, you don't need to look for a reason to let go. So Ajahn Gong rejoices with you all that you've come here to train and practice in mindfulness. And he gave you the easy way to practice mindfulness of breathing is to use what he calls a Rupa Dhamma, or a material object, which is a inhalant medicine to help you with your Anapanasati practice. And he said that this is the easy way to practice.
Okay, stop. Okay.
So, Ajahn Gong's going to wrap up there so we can all pay respect.